Yo, what's up guys? It's C-Jax back with another video, and in today's video I am going to be doing a spoiler review for Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Now, I just got back from seeing this film a second time, and my thoughts have changed from the first time I saw it a little bit, but I've noticed some things that I liked more, and I've noticed some things I didn't like as much, and this is a packed movie that has a lot of things to discuss, so let's go ahead and get right into the review for Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Now, the first thing off the bat that I want to discuss in this film is the thing that honestly was most important to me, which was the tribute to T'Challa / Chadwick Boseman. Now, throughout this film, really at the beginning, they start off with the funeral scene and basically explain that T'Challa did pass from a sickness, similar to how Chadwick Boseman passed away from his illness, of colon cancer and everything like that. But in this film, I thought that the funeral was a little bit off tonally. For some reason, I couldn't decide if it was a celebration of life or a straight up funeral, because it was sad at some parts and, not very sad at other parts and kind of celebratory. So that was a little bit weird to me. It threw me off, I'm going to be honest. And throughout the film, I feel like through Shuri, you really feel that grieving and that loss and pain of the loss of T'Challa. But throughout other characters, besides like Queen Ramonda, I feel like that loss and presence of T'Challa, that and the effect that he had in their lives, feels a little bit lacking to me. They should have leaned more into the emotional impact and how the loss of T'Challa truly affected some of these characters. Because outside of Shuri, at times you completely forget about the fact that T'Challa has passed away, and I didn't really like that a lot. That really threw me off while watching this film. But with that being said, the reverence and respect shown to Chadwick Boseman and to T'Challa through the explanation of his death and how they reference him throughout the movie, I thought that was well done. So yes, could they have leaned more into the emotional aspect with the death of T'Challa and showed a little bit more, well, it's not that they didn't show respect, obviously, but leaned into it a little bit more? Yes, they could have, and I really wish they did, because it kind of took away from the movie for me personally. But with what they, decided to do, I thought it was very respectful in a reverent way, and it actually ended up working well. And now onto the movie itself. Now, this movie has some things I really like, and it has some things that I didn't like as much. But first, let's talk about the things that I did like. First thing we got to talk about is Shuri, played by Letitia Wright, who gives a amazing performance in this film. I think that Shuri's arc in this film really, well, first we need to talk about how the grief and pain that came from losing T'Challa was felt in her performance and inside of the character. And throughout the film, she basically goes through the 5 stages of grief. And I thought that that was a really nice arc and a fitting arc to take her character on after the loss of someone so important to her. And I believe that, overcoming that rage and that vengeance and, that just sadness that consumed her life, the way that she was able to overcome that and then come to the conclusion at the end where she burns the garment and kind of lets go of that grief and overcomes it. I thought that Shuri in this film had a beautiful arc, bro. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. Now, throughout this movie, they introduce her arc at the beginning and they kind of lull for a little bit. But when they focus on it, it is absolutely phenomenal, and there's really no debate about that in my mind. I think Shuri is the greatest female character the MCU has ever witnessed. From depth, from emotion, writing of her character, all of that stuff worked phenomenally with Shuri, and I think that honestly, bro, she was probably the best part of this film and one of the best characters inside of Phase 4. And Michael B. Jordan showing up as Killmonger in this movie I thought was really nice to see. It really showed how Shuri had fallen so far down into the grief and vengeance that had consumed her, and it also showed how Killmonger's ideology makes a return in this film. And it also, in this movie they go over the consequences of what Killmonger did, burning the herbs, all that other stuff, to really tie him into this movie. So seeing Michael B. Jordan back as Killmonger was awesome. At first I thought they were going to make him the Black Panther for a second. I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to do it, because I predicted Killmonger to be in the film. But, they didn't do that, but it's all good, though. He had a good scene. It was good to see him again. You get the point. And I love the parallel they give Shuri in this film to T'Challa in Civil War. Shuri tells Namor, hey, vengeance has consumed us. Let's stop letting it consume us and not let it consume our people. And T'Challa in Civil War, he tells Zemo, vengeance has consumed me, and I'm done letting vengeance consume me. And I thought that little parallel they do to show both of them overcoming their own ways of vengeance, I thought that that was a very nice detail, man. Shuri was just great in this movie, down to literally everything, except for the fact that they focused on her story, then strayed away from it, and then tried to go back. other than that, her story is very good. And dude, even her haircut was good in the movie too. Like her hairstyle was just, she was all around very good. Next, we got to talk about Namor. Now, in this film, when he first shows up, bro, that scene where he takes that helicopter down was honestly sick. The tone of that scene as a whole was honestly awesome as well. And throughout this film, I thought Tenoch Huerta actually gave a pretty solid performance as Namor. I think the elements of his backstory and how that was shown to us was also very cool. Tone of the character was nice as well. But as the film went on, the real threat and imposingness of his character started to wane a little bit in the second half of this film. And another thing with Namor is that they didn't give him a lot to do throughout this movie when you look back on it. After seeing the film twice, I was confused at points, where is Namor? Because they introduce him, right, as a big threat, and then he just kind of, he fizzles out throughout the film, sadly, and it's really disappointing to see something like that. And also with his motives in this film, at the beginning, he just wants to protect his people, and then he goes from that, he wants to dominate the world, then he wants to go kill the scientists, then he wants to dominate the world. It's just a lot of switching the motives, and even at the end when we're supposed to believe that him and Shuri have come to a compromise, he then says that he can use Wakanda's ally with them, you know, to help conquer the world. I'm like, dude, have you learned nothing? What happened with his character in this film? It really did just get worse as it went along. But while we're on the topic of Namor, the people of Talocan, you know, the scenery of Talocan, the Talocan, the visuals of it were also very nice as well. But the side characters in Talocan, like Atuma and I don't know. I'm honestly gonna be, dude, I don't remember the names of the other side characters, but they didn't do much, and I thought that they were kind of inconsequential. They barely had any lines. You get the point. But Namor was a cool character, but he really should have been better, and he just didn't fully hit the mark for me in this film. And other things that I did like about this movie were, first off, the performances were amazing across the board. Angela Bassett as Queen Ramonda, everyone is hyping her up, but guess what? She was truly phenomenal in this film, okay? No one's overhyping her. She truly deserved it. The throne room scene with Okoye was absolutely amazing. Speaking of Okoye, seeing her character evolve after being stripped from the Dora Milaje was an interesting exploration of her character, and I thought it was needed. You know, I thought they did a good job with that. Denai Guerrero gave a great performance. Winston Duke provided great comedic relief in this film. As soon as he walks on screen eating that carrot or whatever that was, it was just hilarious from the get-go. Dominique Thorne, she had some cringy lines, but some of her lines did hit comedy-wise. Comedy in this film hit for the most part. That's another thing I liked about this film as well. And also the tone of this film. It took itself seriously. It wasn't filled with corny jokes like Thor Love and Thunder and Multiverse of Madness and even Shang-Chi. It actually took itself seriously, kept the tone consistent, and kept me more engaged in that sense. One thing about the performances I forgot to mention is that you can tell that those tears and those raw emotions are coming from a place of real grief, like the cast was grieving for Chadwick Boseman. And I thought that was very, very poignant to see that in the film. Now for my cons of the film. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the plot. The plot of this movie feels so conflated at times that it starts to take away from the film. And what I mean by that is that they introduced a story at the beginning of this movie, right? And the theme for this movie, which is going to be overcoming grief, right? But as the film starts to go on, there's a good 30 to 40 minute portion that's like kind of the first act, second act, a little bit of the, well, no, just mostly first and second act, right? Where they introduce these random plot lines like about Riri Williams and her device and her character just in general. Everett Ross and Valentina, they got that going on. And the stuff with the U.S. involvement versus Wakanda and how that might build a conflict over vibranium. And all of that stuff, while they're setting up all of that stuff, it's taking away from the actual story of the movie. The focus on grief and loss and overcoming it, those themes and stuff start to get lost in translation when you're focusing on these random other plot lines. And the worst thing is that these other plot lines aren't really getting developed and aren't getting fitting conclusions. The U.S. conflict with Wakanda and all that stuff, that goes nowhere. Everett Ross and Valentina, that goes nowhere. He gets arrested, then gets broken out. We don't hear from him again. And then you also have the stuff with Riri Williams herself. Her backstory and her development aren't done that well. She kind of just feels like a plot device similar to America Chavez, but better, obviously, because the performance was better, and I thought the character was more interesting than America Chavez. However, it's the same premise. She's just there to move the plot forward. And for these plot lines to be so integral to the film and to the story as they're trying to, you know, they come across in the film, for you to not develop them and give them really good endings, it's like, you're wasting time. In a 3-hour movie or near 3-hour movie, you can't have 30 to 40-minute periods where stuff is just not feeling meaningful. It's feeling meaningless, and you're filling up the movie with that. It bogs down the pacing and make things boring and slow, and you're not filling it with anything that really matters to the audience. So that took away from the movie in a way that, ruined the pacing in parts, and it also took away from the overall story, which was so good. So why would you take away from that to introduce things that you didn't develop? Really, really just irritated me with that. And on top of that, you also have the fact that while they're focusing on those subplots, it took away screen time from other characters. The side characters like Atuma and whoever the other person was for Talocan, they barely have lines. They don't do much of anything. And you also have other characters like M'Baku. He doesn't get a ton of screen time in this film. He makes the most of what he has with his screen time, but you could have given more to him. And also with the extra screen time, you could have also leaned more into the emotional aspect of this film and the loss of T'Challa, which is another thing I have to say about this film. The loss of T'Challa and the loss of Chadwick, it's felt, but it's not as felt as it could have been. And if they found that balance of, giving us that emotion and that grief feel that comes with the loss of T'Challa while also not overdoing it, it would have made the film better. They should have leaned more into the loss of T'Challa and Chadwick and showed how it affected these characters instead of just showing, how it really affected Shuri and Ramonda. Show how it affected everybody. They lean into it a little bit, but you could have gone deeper and it would have really made the film better as to, you're focusing on random plot lines instead of leaning to the emotion. It didn't really work for me in that aspect. Then lastly, as far as flaws goes, like bigger flaws, I still have some other minor nitpicks, but the death of Queen Ramonda I feel like was very unnecessary. I like Queen Ramonda, and Angela Bassett gave a great performance as a character, and I feel like, T'Challa passing away should have been enough motivation for Shuri to become Black Panther. And this is why I said the conflated plots really took away from this film, because instead of focusing on the story and leaning into the emotional aspect of T'Challa's death, they didn't do that. So they had to have Ramonda die off to give Shuri extra motivation, when in reality, you really didn't need to do that. It's kind of a waste of a great casting, a great performance. Well, not really a waste of a great performance, but you get the point. You didn't need to kill the character off, is what I'm trying to say. And a few other minor nitpicks. I thought the VFX and CGI at times was pretty questionable. It looked blurred out sometimes, like the backgrounds looked blurred out. It looked a little hazy. The visual quality wasn't as strong as the first film. And also the soundtrack, believe it or not, wasn't as strong as the first film either, which is a pretty hot take probably, but I didn't love the soundtrack in this film. I thought at certain parts it was phenomenal, like when Shuri lands with the suit and, stuff like that. But overall, it just didn't hit the same as the first one, and it honestly didn't hit a lot just in general. And another minor nitpick is there are some lapses in logic, like Namor at the end. He destroys the ship but doesn't think to get water so he can rejuvenate himself. How do the Talocans know where Riri Williams is on Earth on that bridge and stuff? It's just, I don't understand some of that stuff, and there are some more lapses in logic that I simply, forgot right now, but there are more like that. But yeah, those are all my flaws for the film, to be honest. And guys, I do want to quickly discuss the post-credit scene of this film and how they introduced T'Challa's son into the MCU. Now, we all know about the recast T'Challa hashtags and that whole movement. Me personally, I believe Marvel is going to receive, disdain from fans, whether they didn't recast or whether they did recast. So the decision they decided to do, which was make this movie a tribute to Chadwick and T'Challa, while also essentially recasting by introducing his son into the MCU, I thought that was a very well done way to do it. And the post-credit scene itself was awesome. It was emotional. It was just very heartwarming to see his son, talk to Shuri and to his mom, Nakia. And also the ending of the movie with the tribute to Chadwick and the flashbacks, very well done. And overall with this movie, when it comes down to it, with the tragic hand that they were dealt with the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman and how the cast and crew continued to work on this movie, similar to how, Chadwick Boseman, while he was going through that tough time in his life with the colon cancer, he continued to uplift people and inspire people regardless of the circumstance he was going through. So it is definitely a lot of shout out and respect, not only to Chadwick and what he did on his, during his time on Earth, but also the cast and crew who continued to push through and make this movie. And with that hand they were dealt, I think they passed the test and did a very solid job with this film. Overall, I did expect this movie to be great or amazing. Did it live up to those expectations? No. But am I upset with the end result? Absolutely not. It's still a well-done movie and it's very respectable. I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. It's a very solid movie. So guys, that is going to wrap it up for my Black Panther Wakanda Forever spoiler review. Let me know your thoughts on the film if you've seen it. Do you think it's good, great, bad, or somewhere in the middle. However you're feeling about it, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and Wakanda Forever, man. I hope you guys have a great day, and rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman.
Shuri.